Hello, welcome to our webinar tonight. My name is Joseline Nicholas. Thank you again for attending and for showing up on time. We will get started now. I know people are still joining, but we'll get started. If anyone has a question, please put them in the chat box and I'll get to them as soon as I can. And I know a lot of people submitted questions, so I will try to answer all of them in this webinar. If I can get to your question, please bear with me. I will call you either tomorrow or the day after, and I could answer that question one-on-one. Okay, so a little bit about me. I am a local real estate agent here in Ontario, and I'm also a real estate full-time investor. My husband and I started investing about 7 years ago, and we started in Toronto. And now we have properties in Hamilton, Niagara Falls, Guelph, and Kitchener area. I studied economics in school, so that's kind of where I started. I did economics at McMaster. Then I did a master's at Laurier. When I graduated, I worked for the Ontario government for a few years. And while I was working for the Ontario government, I was buying investment properties. And the reason I share that is because I know that a lot of people on this webinar are probably in my shoes, where you have a full-time job and you want to invest for different purposes, either for your retirement or to save up for your kids' education or for any other reason, just to build wealth in general. So I was in those shoes not so long ago, probably I'm going to say 2014, 2015. We were on those shoes where we're just getting started. And I'm basically glad that I can be here to share my experience and to share what I've learned in the last 7 years that we've been doing this. My superpower, and something that I'm very excited about, is creating wealth through real estate. Not only do I see what it's done for me, I also see what it's done for my clients, at different levels. Those who started a year ago, even those who started 5 years ago, I can see a difference real estate has made in their wealth altogether and in their lives too. I do have a client who I like to share their story. When they started, they had 3 boys, and one of the boy was very gifted in sports. So they basically, the school had recommended that they hire a professional coach for this student because they could see that he was very talented in this particular sport, but the family could not do that because they didn't have enough finances. What they did is they used some of the money that they had. They took money out of their home, they refinanced their home, they bought a few properties, and now they've managed to hire a professional coach for their son who could go on to become a professional player. So things like that, it started as a small thing, but they were able to make a big situation out of it. So this is why I'm very passionate about creating wealth through real estate, because I have kids myself and I'd like to see them afford their dreams. If I can support them become better in future financially, that is something that I need to build a portfolio to allow them to be that. So tonight, we'll be looking at the current market condition. We'll look at basically what's happening in our market update, some statistics. We'll also look at practical advice and examples, just things that I have seen myself as a realtor, but also as an investor. And then we'll jump into the Q&A session, where I will take time to answer the questions that are being submitted, as well as the questions that were submitted before this webinar. Okay, so the current market condition. So right now, as many of you may know, we are going through times of uncertainty. There's a lot of changes in the market, some of which include the change in interest rates. So interest rates are rising from 0.25 to now around 1.5%. And one thing I've noticed is that mortgage rates have gone up higher than that. So right now, I'm seeing on average, mortgages, depending on your profile, maybe about 3.5% to 4%. And then if you're self-employed or you kind of have more properties, it's slightly higher. But those are things that we're seeing. There's definitely a significant change there. We've also seen the government change some regulations targeting foreign buyers. And this is something that was impacting our market even before the rates started changing. So basically, as soon as the government started targeting foreign buyers by restricting foreign buyers, so basically right now, as we have it in Canada, foreign buyers cannot buy a property for the next 2 years. And I know that in Ontario, we also have a regulation that states that foreign buyers in all of Ontario have to pay a foreign buyer tax of 15%. Before, it used to be just a specific area around the GTA, and now they've increased it to cover all of Ontario. So these two, this regulation is impacting demand, which means that there's a subset of buyers who cannot buy now because of these regulations that are in place. We also have the problem of inflation. Everything is gotten so expensive, from food, from clothing, all the basic needs, basically cars, everything is getting more expensive, basically impacting people's finances. If they can't afford to save because they're spending more, then definitely they can't get that home that they've always wanted. We also have a war that's going on right now in Ukraine, creating a lot of uncertainty in the market, which basically is causing a lot of the unknowns that we're going through right now. Another thing that we were just going through in Ontario is the provincial election. I noticed that every time there's an election in Ontario, the real estate market slows down just because people don't know what's happening and who's going to be elected. So now that this is behind us, we can start to see maybe some activity. But again, we also have a few other things that are going on that are not related to the provincial election. So as a result of all these changes, we're seeing decreased demand for homes due to affordability. So people now, those who could afford a home a year ago, or maybe a few months ago, cannot afford under the more recent rates that the banks are charging. And also people are afraid of what could happen next. So they're thinking, oh, what if I buy a property today and tomorrow the market crashes? So we're seeing a lot more people, be fearful, and they don't want to buy or invest. So that is also something that we're seeing. We're seeing people who are like, oh, I'm looking for an even better deal, so I'm going to wait and see what happens. And then, of course, we have buyers who just don't know what to do because they are unclear about the direction that they should take. There is a subset of the population who are just going through this the first time. Maybe they're new to Canada, or maybe they're younger, so they've never been through current market conditions, and they don't know what to do going forward. So some of these things we've been able to discuss with our clients, basically from affordability. A lot of people just assume that they can't afford the homes. So what we've done is basically connect them with a mortgage broker who can actually look at their numbers and see what they can afford and what they cannot afford. In some cases, it's just a matter of rejigging the numbers, maybe paying off some debt that they may have, and then that frees up some borrowing power. We also see in some cases for my clients who kind of are suffering from that lack of direction, or even just waiting to see what could happen, what I've said is, first of all, let's get educated, which is why, I always have these webinars, learn about how to take advantage of this market. I personally believe that this is an opportunity for people to get ahead. Those who will use their time wisely right now and the resources that they have, I think they will gain an unfair advantage. And that is what I'm doing. That is what a lot of my friends who've been investing for a while are doing. They're using this time to get ahead. Because I don't know if you know this, but there's a quote where someone said, when everyone is being fearful, that is when you need to be greedy. When everyone is being greedy, you need to be fearful. So basically, it's that mentality of zigging when everybody else is zagging. And I find that works out in the investment world, because when everyone is buying, the demand is high, just like it was in January or February of this year, where we had little inventory and a lot of buyers. In that case, it's hard as an investor to get a deal. But in a market like this, where the demand is really low, prices are dropping, you as a buyer, you have leverage. You can go in the market and negotiate terms that you couldn't have gotten in January and February. So this is why I think right now there's a window of opportunity, such that if we use it well as investors, we will definitely get ahead. So just looking at some statistics, this is basically the number of new listings on the market. We're seeing that there's increased supply of homes. There's more homes on the market. This graph is for the region of Waterloo. And we see here, for example, in January or December, we had the lowest inventory of 400 homes on market for the whole region of Waterloo. So this includes all the small towns and cities around Waterloo region. So, but now the inventory has gone up. What you're seeing here is for the month of May, because the data for June hasn't come in yet. But for the month of May, we're almost close to 2,000 homes on market. What you can see, and this data is actually very consistent with a lot of other markets. So if I was to pull the data for Hamilton or data for Guelph or Niagara, we're seeing a similar story where the level of inventory has almost quadrupled. So if you had, let's say 400 homes to choose from in February, now we're seeing almost 2,000. So basically, wider selection, and very good thing for buyers, because now you can basically, the sellers are competing for offers. And actually in other markets, it's worse. Like I've seen markets, for example, like Binbrook, where things aren't moving much. Like in the last 20 days, only one detached home has sold in that development. And right now, I think there's probably 19 homes on market, 19 homes active, and only one has sold in the last 20 days. Now, for someone who has a need to sell, there are a lot of sellers in this market who've already bought something, because that was the advice that they were getting in January and February. The advice was, you know what, it's really hard to find a home, buy before you sell. So we have those people who've bought and now they need to sell. If they are in a market where in the last 20 days, only one detached home out of 20 has sold, then some of them become really desperate. And that's where you can go in as an investor to get a deal. We're seeing a lot of those smaller markets. And it's something that definitely as investors we have to watch out for. So I wanted to come here on pricing. So prices are going down. We have high supply, low demand due to the various reasons that I talked about before. So now what we're seeing is prices declining. So what you can see here, it peaked in February and in March started going down. And now as month of May, we are significantly lower. So prices on average right now, they are about 15% lower than they were in February. One thing I'd like to bring your attention to is this entire curve. The reason I put actually this entire curve here is because I wanted to show you that in Ontario, the market fluctuates. The market, like our real estate markets, not only Ontario, if you look at the US or if you look at, any other province, there's fluctuations, there's ups and downs. And I believe it's the same with most investments out there. If you look at the stock market right now, it's crazy. But what I want to bring your attention to is an example of 2017, because I do believe what we're going through right now is most likely going to be similar to what we saw in 2017. Now, there are differences in this time because in 2017, we did not have the level of inflation that we have now. But when you can see, like there was a little bit of a bubble that was corrected in 2017. This decline here was about a good 4 to 6 months. So there was a correction about 4 to 6 months, and then things started going up again at a steady rate. So right now we've been seeing a decline for the last 4 months, maybe even 5 months, because it started in March. So April, May, June, July, no, April, May, June. So a few months. I do believe that in the next few months, I'm thinking maybe even around September, we'll start to see things pick up. One thing I'm really excited about is there's a window of opportunity in the next 2 months, July and August. I think that this is a window of opportunity for 2 reasons. One, historically, if you look at the data, historically, prices always they go up. I mean, they go down in July and August. Why? Because people are away. Parents are on holidays with their kids. Some of the realtors are away, so the market slows down. And when the market slows down, prices go down. This was even the case last year, right? Last year was one of the hottest markets we had. But if you look at the data for June, July, and August, you'll see that the prices went down for a little bit and then they picked up in September when everybody came back. For me as an investor, I am actually prepared to buy at least 3 homes before the end of August, because I want to take advantage of this time when there's a lot of inventory in market and nothing is moving. Nobody's buying, a lot of people are away. I want to take advantage of that. We don't know what could happen as the Bank of Canada continues to intervene and to increase rates. But I know for sure that if I can find a really good deal right now, I will be in a better position to purchase than to wait until September when everybody comes back. So that is something that I'm really excited about. A second reason why I think that things will start to go up is that now we're even seeing in the market, those people who wanted to wait and see where this goes, they are starting to feel comfortable to buy. And those people who could afford to wait a couple months, they're getting to a point where they can't wait anymore. So I do believe that maybe come September, things will start to pick up again. However, you have to remember, no one has a crystal ball on what's happening. We have to be aware of the data as investors, but then make a decision based on the deal itself. That is my belief. Right now, as I'm buying, I am more aggressive on what I'm looking for. Let's say, for example, before the market correction, I was looking for deals that are maybe around 20% or even 10 to 20% below market value. Now, I am more aggressive. I'm looking for deals that are absolutely steals. Like, it has to make sense from different angles. Maybe instead of being 10 to 20% below current market value, it has to be maybe between 20 and 30% for me to buy it, because I'm also thinking that if this isn't the bottom, then I want to build in equity such that if it slows down, I'm still winning as an investor. So these are things that I'm thinking about as I'm planning to buy. Now, some practical advice from an investor perspective. The number one things, and when I put these together, I was also reaching out to some of the very successful investor friends and clients that I have and looking at what they're doing. The first thing a lot of them are doing is they're focusing on the deal criteria and not the market condition. You know, it's about the numbers. And you'll hear a lot of really experienced investors, they don't time the market because you cannot really be accurate on that. The best you can do is know your numbers and know exactly what you're looking for. So for example, instead of saying, oh, it's a bad market or it's a good market, you can just be very specific about what kind of deal you're looking for. And in a market like this, where you know that things are not as active as the market used to be, you can be a little more aggressive. As I say, like, for example, if you want to tend in a market where, like, for example, January or last year, it was really hard to find a home that was underpriced. However, we would still aim for about 10 to 20% lower than market value. We were finding those deals. In this market, you can just be a little more aggressive and maybe say 20 to 30%. And you may ask, how are you getting 30% below market value? I'll tell you, because there's a lot of motivated sellers out there who are looking to sell. For them, they have other priorities that maybe even price is not the number one thing they care about. Some of them can't carry two mortgages. They've already bought another home. They just want to get out. So it's situations like that where maybe somebody has a condition or somebody had a, something that you need to work with basically to solve their problem. In a very good market, we also had situations where people are going through something and they just need to let go of the property. An example is people who had really, really bad tenants, and maybe the tenant hasn't paid in a year, and situations like that. We would go in, we know there's a problem with the tenant situation, and what we'll do is we'll buy the property and we'll work with the tenant, find a win-win situation or make a win-win deal with the tenant such that they can move on or they can go and we can take on the property. And that's basically, I'm just giving examples of, as investors, you're not really focusing on the market itself. It's good to be aware of what's happening because that will guide your decision. However, you want to focus on the deal criteria. The second thing that I think about as an investor is opportunities for a higher return on my investment. There is no better time to find motivated sellers. Right now, in a market where there's 10 other homes on the same street, those people who really have to sell, they are motivated. And when you meet them, And in that case, that creates an opportunity for higher return on investment. And that's why I think that right now, as an investor, you should definitely be thinking about looking, because there's more deals on the market, there's more opportunities on the market, and it's much easier to find a deal that works with the numbers that we're looking for as Ontarians. Because I know in Ontario, the average price of a home is so high, it's so hard to make those numbers work. But I'm telling you that in this market, for somebody who's gonna take this moment to seize the opportunity, they will definitely end up in a place where they're much far ahead than everybody who's just, waiting and panicking and not making a decision because they don't know what to do. Another thing that I'm very passionate about is education and strategy. I believe that as an investor, you have to definitely continue learning, continue growing. Instead of thinking about panicking and fear, there's a lot of clients who reached out to me and said, hey, oh my goodness, prices are dropping. I feel so bad. I want to sell. And I'd say, wait a minute, why are you thinking about selling? Your property is cash flowing. You don't need the money. When you bought the property, you had a plan to keep the property long term. We've seen here on the graph that the Ontario market fluctuates, it goes up and down. And it's not only the Ontario market, it's most markets, most investments will fluctuate. Why would you make a quick decision, panic decision to sell when all you have to do is sit and wait, especially if you don't need the money, your property is cash flowing, it's not a burden on you. You just hold it until you're in a place until you need to sell, especially for those who have long-term goals. So these are things that if you are educated, you don't panic, because I have a lot of properties right now. The market is dropping, but I'm not worried about that because I know that market fluctuates. I don't need the money. The properties are cash flowing. In fact, in most cases, those properties are paying me to own them because on a monthly basis, I have a positive cash flow that's coming into my bank account. So I'm comfortable. The only people right now who could be in a position that is not comfortable are those investors who've bought properties that are not cash flowing. For example, if you bought new builds, condos, and those properties that have maybe condo fees and things like that, you can only hold them for so long because it becomes a burden on you. You have to put money into them on a regular basis. When I'm talking to my investors, we're always looking at cash flowing properties because we know that the market could change. In a good market, it's easy to be an investor. In a shifting market, that's when skill and strategy has to come in. And for those people who have properties that are not cash flowing, that's when we have to have a conversation and say, okay, how long can you hold it for? Are you able to hold it even, or should we sell, right? That brings me to point number 4, which is like having a long-term vision versus a short-term uncertainties. All these things that are happening now, it's all short-term. But if, let's say, you're buying a property for your own retirement, or you're buying a property for your kids' education, in most cases you have time. So if you have time, you have nothing to worry about. That is why I'm also a big fan of buying right now in this market, because prices are so low and there's more opportunities to get good deals. So I'm thinking that if you buy in this market and you have a long-term vision, the market will come back up. One of these days, a client of mine bought a property for $925. That same property in January, it would have sold for 1.2. So she's picking it up for $925. In January, it could have sold for 1.2. I know, and this property needed maybe a good 30,000 of renovations because there's things she has to do to it. I know that once she does the work, it's going to be worth more. And once the market corrects, the neighborhood is good, everything is perfect. It's literally best situation. Once the market picks up, this property will immediately, maybe I shouldn't say immediately, but eventually they will come back to what the market value was before things started going down. And a few months or years after, this property will go to 1.5. Those opportunities are what I'm looking for, especially because these properties in a neighborhood where surrounding properties are way more expensive than it. So it's just things like that that we're looking for instead of just worrying about what the market is doing. We need to focus more on how can we get the best deal. Last but not least, rental rates right now are skyrocketing. There's a demand for rental units. And some of the reasons for that is a lot of people are not buying and they need a place to live, so they have to rent. Now we're seeing a lot more qualified, they could potentially buy their own home, but they have to rent because of the situation they're in. For example, we're seeing a lot of foreign, like international students or, foreign educated, or I should say immigrants, maybe not even immigrants, just people who are new to Canada. That's the word I was looking for, new Canadians, who are not allowed to buy because they have to either pay a 15% tax when they purchase, or the government has banned them altogether from buying. They have high income, they have a good job, they could have been able to buy. In some cases, they have a big down payment, but they can't buy. So in that case, they have to rent. And those are some of the best tenants you can find out there. People with high income, they're educated and good, good finances. make very good tenants. So I'm thinking right now we're seeing a lot of those rents go up, and it definitely creates an opportunity for an investor to come in and, you know, take advantage of that market. Now, if you are thinking to buy and you don't know where to start, I've made these 5 steps as basically a guide as to where you could start and things you should be thinking about. The first thing you should be thinking about is getting pre-approved. So basically, the reason I'm saying that is when you get pre-approved, when you meet with a mortgage broker or a bank, then we know what your budget is. Right now, it's so hard to make any decisions when we don't know what your budget is. And for those people who are wondering how to find a mortgage broker, how to find the right bank, you can reach out to us. We do have connections, especially in Ontario, where we can connect you with somebody who can help you unpack that. Once we know what your budget is, we have to think about your goals. What is it that you want to achieve? Are you investing for cash flow? Are you investing for appreciation? Are you investing to create equity? Or is this for your retirement? Is it for your kids' education? How much time do we have? So we definitely need to get a good understanding of what your goals are. When I started investing, my husband and I's goals were to basically have enough cash flow to cover our expenses so we can leave our jobs. That was step number 1. And our goal was cash flow. So we made sure that every single property we bought had a good cash flow of about $1,000. So right now, most of our properties on average, we get $1,000 cash flow. Then once we have enough of those properties, we know we have enough money to cover our expenses, and that is how we left our jobs. So once we know what the goal is, we can aim towards that. Another thing is we have to get a good understanding of the desired deal criteria. What are you looking for? For example, like, are you looking for something you can renovate? Are you looking for something that is already renovated? You know, so those are all things that we can, as well as location, like where would you like to be? A lot of people don't realize that you can actually invest almost anywhere, you know, as long as you have the tools and the systems to support you. What I mean by that is if you live in the GTA, I know that GTA prices are more expensive and it's going to be harder to make a lot of the numbers work. So you don't really have to stick to GTA criteria. You can look in Northern Ontario, you can look in Southern Ontario, you can come to Guelph, you can go to Kitchener, Waterloo, Niagara. We have properties in all different places. And actually, we are adding Northern Ontario to our list because we realize that we don't have to be stuck in Southern Ontario. We can explore. And as long as our numbers work and we have systems to support our investment efforts. So what I mean by that is when you want to go into a different market, you need to have good connections. So we've been working on those connections for years. So now we're in a place where we're comfortable to go to Northern Ontario because we have a property manager there, which is very, very important. We have some connections, people can help us with good deals, lending and all that. So these are all things that you should be thinking about. Next, you have to team up with an expert realtor who is also an investor. This is a big one. Before I was a realtor, I was working with various realtors to find my properties because I was still working for the government. And one of the things that, you know, I would always watch out for, because I actually, when I was investing, we had mentors who were already investors and they could take us through the journey. And they taught us to watch out because you need to be careful who you take advice from. I remember I met with this one realtor, and he was showing me a bungalow in Hamilton. The numbers didn't work. I thought the bungalow was overpriced, but he was like, oh, look, you can do some of this work yourself. You can do, basically trying to convince me why the numbers work. And I told him, first of all, if I do the work myself, I still have to pay myself. So I'm not going to write it off as if it's a free expense. But for him, he wasn't understanding it because he's not an investor. Investors, we think differently. We don't want to say, oh, first of all, you don't want to force a deal that doesn't work to work because it will never work. That is just, if a deal doesn't work, it just doesn't work. Right now, myself, a lot of those people I surround myself with, from my mortgage broker, my lawyer, my inspector, like they're all investors. And the reason why I like to surround myself with investors is because as investors, we come across various challenges. For example, from a lending perspective, If you're working with a mortgage broker who's not an investor, they will not know what to say when the bank says, no, we can't lend, the ratio is too high or something like that, because they don't know, they've never dealt with that situation before. But if you have a mortgage broker who maybe they have, you know, way more properties than you have. In fact, my mortgage broker has more properties than I have. They've been through what I'm going through. They've been through, you know, some of the issues that I'm coming across, they've been through them already. They also have clients who also match my portfolio, right? Who are very similar to my situation. So then they're able to look at the case and know, I know what to do here. And you know, with any deals, any lending, you can't guess because the banks know exactly what they want. So when you're working with somebody who already knows who is an investor, they definitely have the mindset to take you to the next level. Number 4, you have to do your own due diligence and stick to deal criteria. What I mean by this is I've spoken to a lot of people who say, oh, the builder told me it was a good investment. You know, the builder they did this, or the builder's rep told me this. You have to remember the builder's rep doesn't work for you. They work for the builder. So you are responsible to doing your own due diligence. I even tell this to my clients, look, I will run your numbers, I will present my case to you, but it is your job to also make sure that you understand the numbers and to make sure that you've done your due diligence. And the reason I say this is, while I could do a good job, you're still responsible also to knowing what your numbers are, because when something goes wrong, you don't want to blame anybody. You want to make sure that you did your due diligence. For example, I had a friend before I was a realtor who bought a property with another realtor. My friend was not a Canadian resident yet. And I think when it came to closing, they had to pay all kinds of fees for not being a Canadian resident. And they sued the realtor that they worked with for not advising them as foreigners. The realtor didn't know they were, like, you know, I think everybody dropped the ball in the end, but I think the way the case ended is you knew you were not you knew you were not a resident. You knew you were not a Canadian resident, so you should have done something about it. I think the case ended up with the clients themselves did not do enough due diligence to understand what it meant for them to buy a property in Canada when they were not residents. So basically what I'm trying to say is do your due diligence. Number 5 is to avoid common mistakes that novice investors make. I have a video on YouTube. If you type in Joseline Nicholas, you'll see some of those mistakes that a lot of investors make. And I'm not going to go through them right now because time is tight and I want to get through this presentation. But some of those mistakes involve poor tenant screening. So most of what you want is basically having a system in place that will allow you to screen tenants properly, or maybe hiring professionals who can do it for you if you cannot do it. Alrighty, so now I will take time to address some of the questions that I come across more often than not. I will also take time to look at the questions that were submitted ahead of time, and I will look at questions that are being submitted right now as I speak. So the first question that I like, these 3 questions, I get them all the time. One of them is, how can I find cash flowing properties? That is a very good question, especially when you're in Ontario, because right now in Ontario, the average price of a home is probably about $850. And in most cases, these are single family homes. So I want to let you know that single family homes are not ideal investment properties. In most cases, if you're looking to do a quick flip or a different strategy, it could work. But if you're looking to hold that property long term, a single family home will not cash flow in Ontario. So in most cases, if you're looking for cash flowing properties, you have to look at multi-units. Right now, my husband and I, what we have is all multi-units. And we don't buy properties that don't have potential for multi-units. So sometimes I will buy a single family home if I see potential to convert it to multifamily. And we always convert them before we rent them out, because I know you can't cash flow with a single family home in Southern Ontario. Another thing that you have to be thinking about when you're looking for cash flowing properties is you have to go outside the GTA. I love GTA. In fact, my husband grew up in Toronto, and we started investing there too. However, right now prices have gone so high that in order to find a cash flowing property, it has to be multiple units, or you have to literally step outside Toronto. Now I'm seeing even markets like Hamilton, Kitchener, Guelph, like they've become expensive too. So in some cases, we're having to go even further, right? So Niagara is a good market. Even here, like especially with the prices changing right now and the market shifting, we can definitely get you a good price, a good investment property, and we will run our numbers to make sure that this property we're talking about meets the criteria of a good investment property. The next question is, with increasing interest rates, should we buy now or wait? I think we've answered this question. Do not wait unless you have another reason to wait. Right now, yes, rates are high, but there's a lot of really good opportunities to buy for something way below market value. And I know an argument has been, well, interest rates are high, so they cancel out. It's so true. But this situation, I do believe it's temporary. Once inflation goes back to the targeted inflation rate, I believe the rates will come down. So if you bought something, let's say right now, I'll be honest with you, I'm paying about 5% interest because, you know, I'm more riskier. I guess my portfolio has grown. So on average, I'm paying about 5% interest. I don't mind it. Think about it this way. And I love when I think about things in this manner. It's so amazing. It's like magic. So right now, I'm paying about 5% on, when I buy a property, I pay about 5% interest. Guess what? Inflation is around 7 to 10%. That's inflation right now. So which means the money I'm borrowing now at 5% interest is going to be less, you know, it's basically it's going to lose value by about 7 to 10%. So basically I'm borrowing money for free. That's just, I don't know if that makes sense, but if you think about it, we are using money for free. If I buy a property for $1 million and the bank gives me 800 at 5% and inflation is 7 or 10%, they're giving me that money for free because the rate of inflation is higher than the interest that I'm paying. So if you have, like, you know, millions of millions of borrowed money at, you know, most cases less than 5%, but of course, as of today, 5%, and inflation is like 7 to 10%, literally, this is free money that I'm using to grow my wealth over time. It's not only me, but all the experienced investors who are out there, they're doing this. They're borrowing money for free. And when you think about it, it's literally free money. It might not make sense to some of you, but I can explain that one-on-one. Another quick question that I get is, what about pre-construction? So this is a good question. I love this question because pre-construction was the topic of, you know, the last couple of years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, where everybody's getting into pre-construction. When we started investing, we were very careful about pre-construction because pre-construction is just different. First of all, for you to be successful in pre-construction, the market has to be going up. Because when you're working with a builder, you can't really negotiate with the builder. They set their terms, they set their price. There's no negotiations really. So in most cases, you're paying market value because you have no opportunity to pay less than market value. So then you only make money if these prices appreciate over time. So I was very hesitant to go into pre-construction because of that. And I feel like when you do pre-construction, you're limited. You have to go by the rules and regulations that the builder will set. I wanted more freedom, more creativity. So we did stay away from pre-construction until maybe like 2020. I ended up buying 2 pre-construction. You know how the market went up. So I still made a lot of money on those properties that I bought. But I think I don't like that I wasn't in control, and that if you do that in today's market, you'll definitely lose money. I don't like pre-construction in today's market because you're buying it at a high price. And when we saw that curve that things are going down, I think it will take time for people to make the kind of money that they were making in pre-construction. I guess to answer this question in short and in summary, is that I would not buy pre-construction right now unless it's such an amazing deal. And I think that for me to see it as an amazing deal, I don't know what that will take. I think that pre-construction is risky right now. Another thing that I'm also thinking about is that a lot of builders, they also have their own numbers. And a lot of pre-construction is single family homes, you know, they're single units. So a lot of people who are buying right now, for example, on average, townhouse in Guelph is about 900. In fact, if it's larger in square footage, it's even higher than $1 million. But when you rent it out and you pay those condo fees, there's no way you'll cash flow. So reconstruction is painful in a sense that you have to hold it and you have to put money into it. If it was appreciating at the rate that it was appreciating in the last couple of years, it made sense because yes, you're putting money into it, but long term you're making money because it's going up by 30% every year. That makes sense. However, in a place like now where prices are going down, why would you want to own a property that you put money in and it's not even appreciating? So that's why I say no pre-construction. Okay, so now I'll just take a quick minute to look at some questions that have been submitted. We did get a few questions that came in, so I will just take a moment to pull those up. Okay, so what advice would you have for someone who's looking for an investment property with over 20% down payment ready? That is a good question. If you have more than 20%, that is something that we can sit down and kind of see what kind of property you're looking at, but having more down payment is always good. In some cases, if you have a really significant down payment, we might be able to split it into two, and maybe instead of getting one property, get two properties. That's a possibility. We could also just look at buying a property that, with high down payment, therefore increasing your cash flow. So that is something that we can definitely look at. And the advice I'd have for you for sure is to, be diligent, get a clear understanding of the kind of deal you're looking for, and then go out there and find it. What would be the best property for positive cash flow right now? So right now in this market, if you're looking for positive cash flow, you definitely need multiple units. And right now we're in a unique time where rates are very high. So because rates are high, your mortgage payment is going to be higher. So we definitely want to make sure that we're getting your property. First of all, it has to be way below market value. And second of all, it has to be multifamily so that you can cash flow. If you get a single unit, you will not see cash flow. Another question that's come in is, I bought my first property last year and the value has gone up by, I think this question is not complete. I think the value has gone up by $250,000. I guess if you have a property that has appreciated so much, you could consider refinancing and buying an investment property. That is something you could do. I would like to sit down one-on-one and talk to you about it, especially because there are things we have to consider. When you refinance in today's market, you will pay a higher rate. And you might also have to break the mortgage and pay additional fees. But it might be worth it if you use the money for the right reasons. For example, I just refinanced one of my properties. I was paying 1.8% before, and now I'm going to be paying 5%. But I'm taking them and I'm probably going to be pulling out maybe $400,000. I'm taking that money and buying maybe 2 or 3 properties. If I buy 2 or 3 properties that are way, maybe let's say 150,000 under market value, that's 450,000 combined. So if I pay fees or if I pay a higher rate, all of it is already accounted for. And you have to remember that your interest payments, let's say if you have 5% rate, my interest payment is an expense to me. So when I go to file taxes, I will have that accounted for as an expense. So in some cases, it's actually beneficial for me. But then it also frees up capital that I could use to get ahead. Now, I'm not an accountant, so I'm not going to talk much about taxes, but I'm just saying we can talk one-on-one to make sure that we put you in the best situation so that even though you're paying fees up front and your rate is going high, overall, you're making money in the long term. There's a question here that says, so are we in a buyer's market where I can finally dictate terms as a first-time home buyer? Yes, we're definitely in that place where a lot of sellers don't have options and they have to compete for the few buyers that are out there. So right now is a good time to be able to negotiate good terms that you couldn't have gotten in January and February. So right now, if you're looking to buy as a first-time home buyer or as an investor altogether, it's definitely a good time to go out there and get a good deal, negotiate the best terms. I've seen sellers who are offering to pay for your property taxes for a year. I've seen sellers who are offering to pay your property taxes. I've already said that, sorry, closing fees. For example, if you have to pay, like lawyer fees, land transfer tax, I've seen sellers who are offering to pay that. I've seen sellers who are accepting offers that are conditional on you selling your own home. There's no way a seller would have accepted that in January. An offer conditional on the sale of another home, that is just insane. But we're seeing that because they have no other offer on the table and they have to work with what they have. So definitely this is a good time to get some of those good deals, because there's very more options and few competition. Okay, so there's a question here. I'm looking at in the chat and it says, how often do you work with first-time investors? That's a good question. I actually work with a good number of them. And if I was to maybe give a percentage, I'm going to say that I think it's about 50-50. 50% where it's the first-time investor and 50% where they already have 2 or 3 properties. So if you had any questions about how to navigate the market as a first-time investor, we'll be here for you. In fact, we've worked with people who have no clue. And you know what? Some of my clients are also like new Canadians. So they have no clue how the Canadian market works from all angles. And in most cases, sometimes I have to connect them with proper professionals who can give them good advice, like a lawyer, accountant, and things like that. But from a practical perspective, I'm able to guide you and teach you what I know as an investor myself. Okay, there's another question here. We bought a pre-con last year, August, based on our current property being valued at 900. However, the last sale is roughly about 800. Pre-con is ready in January. Trying to work out the numbers if we still qualify for both. We qualified at an earlier this year based on the rates. Have a HELOC for the 20% for the new house. Wondering if we should sell before it gets worse in October, November. We plan to keep both, but things are changing. This is a unique place to be in. And to be honest, you're not the only one. We're seeing it very commonly where people bought a property planning for certain numbers and now values have gone down. I will be the first to admit that I am in those shoes myself, but I'm not worried about it because I planned for that situation. So right now, my family, we're moving to a new house that we built. And this one, the one we're in, could have sold for a significantly higher amount. But I'm not worried about that. I'm not selling it. So I will rent this one and keep it. And I will move into the other one as well. So this one we're in is also multifamily. So then we have a basement apartment that's rented out. So both units will cover our expenses. So I'm not worried. But to answer your question, I think this is something that we would have to talk one-on-one. And the reason I'm saying that is there's a lot of things I would have to look at. First of all, I would like to go back to the bank or the mortgage broker and ask them if you will qualify at these rates. At today's value, do you still qualify? Because I see here you say that you qualified earlier based on these numbers. I would like to get a professional to tell you if you still qualify. Because in most cases, you might still qualify and you could keep both, right? So I think that if you can keep both, that's good. However, if you can't, I think that, yeah, you should be thinking about selling. And I know you also say that you have a HELOC. I wonder if it's used or if the money is still available. If you have a down payment for the next one, 20%, you might be able to buy it and keep the pre-existing one. So I'd say, let's chat about your situation and involve proper professionals who can basically advise you and give you the best advice. I can connect with you later and we can talk about this. We have 5 minutes to go and I could probably take 1 or 2 questions. Another question that I get a lot in my webinars is, where do people get the money to invest? And in most cases, a lot of my clients actually get the money from their own property. So if you own a property that you bought years ago, let's say 4 or 5 years ago, even 3 years ago, I think prices have gone up so much. So a lot of my clients are refinancing their homes and using that equity to buy a home. If you don't want to refinance because you have a good rate and you don't want to break that mortgage, I've seen people get HELOCs, right? So basically that's a line of credit, homeowner line of credit. And that could create a down payment that you could use as an investor to buy the next property. So that is something that, and also, like, to be honest, that's how I bought my second property, which was my first investment. We refinanced our home to buy the next investment. So right now we're at 6:57, very close to 7. We have 3 more minutes, but I don't have any other questions. So I just want to take a minute and say thank you very much for attending our webinar. My contact information is actually here. And if anybody wants to get a one-on-one consultation or they want to speak to me, this is my contact information. On social media, we are on Facebook, we are on Instagram, on LinkedIn, as well as YouTube. Especially YouTube is important because that's where I upload all the recordings. This webinar right now is being recorded and the recording will be posted on our YouTube channel. So if you wanted to view previous recordings as well, YouTube would be the best place to go. And my handle is @Joseline Nicholas, or if you just search Joseline Nicholas. Otherwise, thank you very much for being here. And I believe and I hope that you learned something that will help you achieve your goals as an investor. And if you have any questions, always feel free to reach out. Thank you again. I hope you have a wonderful evening.